It was a typical morning at the prestigious Williams Enterprises, one of the most exclusive companies in the world. The offices, high above the bustling city streets, were buzzing with the usual energy. Employees rushing around, working on multi-million-dollar deals, and executives casually discussing their next big investment. But amidst all this luxury and high stakes, there was a woman no one paid attention to. Her name was Carol, a cleaning lady, and she moved through the hallways unnoticed, wiping down the glass windows, mopping the floors, and tending to every corner of the pristine building. She wasn't part of the high-powered crowd. She wasn't someone who attended lavish meetings or made decisions that shaped the future of the company. Yet, what Carol didn't know was that the life she was leading was about to collide with one of the most powerful men in the business world, a billionaire who thought he knew everything there was to know about success. You see, Charles Williams, the CEO of Williams Enterprises, was a man who had everything: money, power, influence, and most importantly, a reputation. His wealth, built from the ground up, had earned him respect and admiration from business tycoons around the globe. But there was something about Carol that made him uneasy. Something about the way she walked through the halls of his empire. Her humble demeanor, her quiet confidence. It bothered him. One day, as he passed her while she was cleaning the restroom on the top floor, he couldn't resist the temptation to make a snide remark. With a smirk, he leaned over, pointed at her ragged uniform, and laughed. "You clean up well, but I wonder if you're cleaning up your own mess in life." His words were sharp, meant to belittle her, to show just how far apart they were in the world. Carol, who had heard her fair share of snide remarks in the past, didn't flinch. She simply nodded, finished wiping the counter, and moved on with her day. Little did he know, Carol's life was far more complex and extraordinary than he could ever imagine. Her quiet presence masked a past full of twists, turns, and secrets that no one, least of all the arrogant billionaire, could ever guess. That seemingly insignificant moment, that one brief exchange between the two of them, would set off a chain of events that would shake the very foundation of the Williams family. Days passed, and Charles Williams carried on with his life, thinking little of the cleaning lady. But there was something brewing beneath the surface, something in Carol's past that would soon come to light. It all began when the company's HR department received an unexpected letter, one that would change everything. The letter, signed by a hospital administrator, contained startling information, a series of confidential medical records, detailing a complex history that no one could have imagined. According to the records, Carol was far more than just a cleanings lady. In fact, she was connected to the Williams family in a way no one, including Charles himself, could have ever expected. The hospital records revealed a series of medical procedures that suggested a history of intense surgeries and treatments, a history that only the most wealthy and powerful families could afford. Why was Carol, someone who had been scrubbing floors for years, connected to the world of the elite? The answer was hidden in the hospital's files, in a set of records that revealed a stunning and nearly unbelievable secret. Carol, it seemed, had a remarkable connection to the Williams family that no one, including Charles himself, could have guessed. This connection was tied to a family tragedy that had been buried for decades, one that, if revealed, could tear apart everything Charles thought he knew about his family's legacy. As the HR department scrambled to investigate, Charles found himself receiving disturbing phone calls and dealing with mysterious figures showing up at his office. Every clue seemed to lead back to Carol, the quiet cleaning lady he had once mocked. But what exactly was her connection to the Williams family? How did she have access to the kind of medical treatment that only the ultra-wealthy could afford? And more importantly, why had this secret been hidden for so long? The more Charles tried to uncover, the more tangled the web became. He began to realize that the very foundations of his family's success and his own place in the world were built on something he never could have predicted, a truth so powerful, so shocking, that it could unravel everything. But there was one problem. Carol was nowhere to be found. She had disappeared without a trace, leaving behind only the records that held the answers to the questions he couldn't stop asking. As Charles dug deeper into his own family's past, the truth about Carol slowly began to emerge. It was a truth that no one could have imagined, one that would forever change the way Charles looked at the world around him and at himself. But would he be able to uncover the full story before it was too late? Or would Carol's secret remain hidden forever, lost to the shadows of time? The answers lay in the past, but the journey to uncover them would take Charles to places he never expected to go. Would he finally confront the truth about Carol? Or would the billion-dollar empire he had built crumble under the weight of secrets that had been kept for far too long? One thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. Charles Williams couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Every day, as he walked through the sleek, modern halls of his company, he couldn't stop thinking about the cleaning lady, Carol. The memory of his mocking words still lingered in his mind, and an unsettling feeling grew in his gut. How could someone like her be connected to the Williams family? He had to know more, and for the first time in years, Charles found himself consumed by the need to uncover the truth. The medical records had been clear, but they left more questions than answers. Carol's name was listed in the files, but it wasn't just the treatments and surgeries that piqued his interest. It was the names and dates. The history connected her to an old family tragedy that no one had spoken about for decades. He had always been told that his family's wealth came from hard work, strategic investments, and a bit of luck. But what if there was something more to it? What if the family legacy was tied to something darker? Charles began to dig into the family archives, long forgotten in a dusty room in the mansion. The further he went back, the more his world seemed to crumble. His great-grandfather, it turned out, had been involved in a scandalous affair with a woman who had mysteriously disappeared from the public eye. That woman, as it turned out, was Carol's grandmother, a woman who, according to family whispers, had given birth to a child, Carol's mother. But something had happened that had caused her to be erased from the family's history, as if she had never existed. Charles sat back in his chair, trying to process the tangled web of connections. If Carol's mother was, in fact, his great-grandfather's daughter, that would mean Carol was his distant relative. He was connected to her by blood. But why had she never been acknowledged? Why had she been allowed to live in the shadows, scrubbing floors in the very building that his family had built? It didn't make sense. Charles had always prided himself on being the smartest person in the room, the one who understood how the world worked, the one who could control every aspect of his empire. But this was something he couldn't control. Carol's existence, her connection to him, threatened to shake the very foundations of his empire. What did it mean for him personally, for his family's legacy? And why had no one ever told him about this? As Charles continued to unravel the past, a new layer of mystery emerged. Carol's disappearance wasn't a simple matter of her quitting her job. She had been actively avoiding contact. No one in the company had seen her for days. And when Charles had asked around, no one could give him a clear answer. It was almost as if she had vanished into thin air. The more Charles searched, the more it seemed like Carol was hiding from something or someone What had she discovered about her past that had driven her to disappear? Meanwhile, in a quiet, nondescript apartment on the outskirts of the city, Carol sat alone. The revelation of her connection to the Williams family had hit her like a ton of bricks. She had spent years keeping her head down, hiding from the ghosts of her past, but now it seemed like her past was coming for her, ready to turn her world upside down. She had always known there was something different about her, something that didn't fit with the life she had built, but she had never dared to dig too deep. Until now. Carol knew that the truth could destroy everything. Her job, her privacy, her quiet life. And yet, as much as she feared what would happen if the world found out, she couldn't bring herself to go back. The past had a way of catching up with people, and she knew that once she went back to the Williams family, there would be no turning away from the consequences. Her phone rang, breaking the silence. It was an unknown number. Carol hesitated, unsure whether to answer, but something urged her to pick up. "Hello?" she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Carol!" came the voice on the other end. It was a man's voice, low and firm. "We need to talk, now." The suddenness of the call startled her. It was the last thing she expected. "Who is this?" she asked, her hand trembling slightly. "You know who I am," the voice replied, a cold edge to it. "You've been avoiding us for too long. It's time to face the truth." Carol's heart raced. She knew exactly who this was. The voice belonged to someone she had been trying to escape for years. Someone who knew all her secrets. Someone who had the power to ruin everything. "I don't want any part of this," she said, her voice trembling. But the man didn't let up. "You don't have a choice. You're tied to us, whether you like it or not. The truth is out now. The Williams family is involved, and they won't stop until they get the answers they're looking for. You need to come back and make this right." Carol's mind raced. Charles Williams, the billionaire CEO, had been asking questions about her. He had uncovered her connection to the family. It was only a matter of time before he found her, before he realized the truth that had been hidden for so long. But what was the truth? What was the secret that could unravel everything? She was caught between two worlds. The world she had tried to build for herself, hidden away from the powerful forces of the Williams family, and the truth that was threatening to drag her back into the chaos she had spent so many years running from. As Carol hung up the phone, she knew she couldn't run any longer. The time for hiding was over. The only question that remained was whether she would be able to face the storm that was coming, or whether it would consume her whole. And for Charles Williams, the question was equally pressing. Could he handle the truth about his family's legacy and the woman who had been hiding in plain sight all these years? The tension was thick, and the pieces of the puzzle were coming together. But would they be able to uncover the full story before it was too late? The clock was ticking, and everything was about to change. Carol knew she couldn't avoid this anymore. The call had made that clear. Her connection to the Williams family was no longer just a secret. It was a ticking time bomb. The fact that Charles Williams was now searching for answers meant she was out of time. With the storm closing in, Carol made a decision that changed everything. She couldn't run from her past any longer, and if the truth was going to come out, it might as well come from her. The next day, Carol showed up at Williams Enterprises, the very building she had once cleaned in the shadows, hoping no one would notice her. But today, all eyes would be on her. She was going to face Charles head on. She wasn't just a cleaning lady anymore. She was someone who held the key to a family's deepest secrets. Charles had been in his office all morning, a mix of frustration and curiosity churning inside him. He knew the woman he had once dismissed was far more important than he could ever have imagined, but he didn't understand why she had disappeared. What was she hiding? The pieces of the puzzle were almost complete, but something still didn't sit right with him. Just as he sat back in his chair, pondering his next move, there was a knock on the door. He turned, and there she was. Carol, standing tall, no longer the quiet cleaning lady, but a woman ready to speak her truth. Her eyes met his, and for the first time, Charles saw her not as someone beneath him, but as an equal, someone whose presence commanded attention. "Carol," Charles said, standing up. There was a mix of tension and something else in his voice, as if he knew this was the moment everything changed. "What is this about? Why are you here?" Carol took a deep breath, stepping into the room. "I know you've been looking for answers," she said quietly, her voice steady but firm. "And I think you deserve the truth." Charles watched her carefully, 1,000 thoughts racing through his mind. He had been right to dig deeper, but now, as she stood before him, he had no idea what to expect. "I know you found the hospital records," she continued. "And I know you're wondering why no one ever told you about me." She paused, her gaze softening slightly as she spoke. "The truth is, I'm your half-sister." Charles blinked, his mind struggling to catch up with the words she had just said. "What?" he whispered, as if trying to process the enormity of her revelation. Carol nodded. "Your great-grandfather, Robert Williams. He had an affair with my grandmother, a woman named Evelyn Turner. My mother, Julia, was the product of that affair. She never got the chance to be a part of the family. When my mother was young, she was ostracized. And eventually, she raised me away from all of this. No one wanted to admit the truth, because it would have destroyed the family name. And so, my entire family, myself included, was erased from the story." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog. Charles struggled to process what she was saying. The secrets of his family, the things that had been buried for so long, were coming to light in the most unexpected of ways. He had built his life on a legacy that now felt like a lie. His great-grandfather, the man he had always idolized, had a secret family, a secret that had been hidden from him, from everyone. "But why?" Charles asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why didn't you? Tell me, why hide all of this?" Carol took a step forward. "I had no choice. My mother was scared. She didn't want to bring shame on the family, and I was raised to keep quiet. The life I live now, it's a result of running from the past, not confronting it, but the truth. It's been eating away at me, and now, after everything you've uncovered, I can't stay silent anymore." Charles felt a wave of emotions rush through him. Anger, disbelief, guilt, but something else too, a deep sense of shame. His whole life had been built on the idea that he was different, that his family was perfect, that the Williams name was untouchable. And now, standing before him, was the woman he had once mocked, the sister he never knew he had, who had lived a life so much more complicated than his own. As the weight of the revelation settled in, the tension in the room was palpable. Charles felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. Everything he had known, his wealth, his success, his identity, was now called into question. The truth had the power to shatter his world, and Carol was the one holding the pieces. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Charles finally broke the silence. "I don't know what to say." Carol smiled sadly. "You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know the truth. I'm not here to take anything from you. I never wanted this life, this family. But now that you know, we have to decide what to do with it." The silence that followed was thick with the enormity of the moment. Carol had come to face the truth, and in doing so, she had unlocked the door to a part of the Williams family that had been locked away for years. There was no going back. Charles nodded slowly. the realization hitting him fully. "I don't know what the future holds," he said quietly, his voice betraying his inner conflict. "But I do know one thing. We can't erase the past, and we shouldn't try." With that, the tension in the room began to lift. Carol had faced her demons, and Charles had faced the truth. The years of silence, of secrets, had come to an end. In that moment, the Williams legacy, his legacy, was forever altered. And while the future remained uncertain, there was a sense of clarity in the air. Sometimes, the truth has a way of making everything right, even when it seems impossible. As Carol turned to leave, she paused at the door. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice full of emotion. For listening. Charles watched her leave, feeling a strange sense of peace. The empire he had built would never be the same, but maybe, just maybe, it would be better for it. And as he sat back down at his desk, he couldn't help but reflect on the key takeaway from this whirlwind of a revelation. The truth may be uncomfortable. It may threaten everything, but in the end, it's the one thing that can set you free.